Svitlana, I am very happy to see you. You are back online. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty well, thank you. So, now, as we can already see, dear viewers, Svitlana is not in her usual home. It is in her home in Ukraine because
Yeah.
you are still traveling around the world. You have been traveling for the last couple of weeks, and it is still continuing. So that's pretty exciting. How is Ukraine doing at the moment? Is it a nice place to stay?
Yeah. Ukraine. It's really hot in Ukraine right now.
Hmm.
At least for my for me being used to Canadian weather.
I get
But
that.
yeah, it's really nice. I feel like COVID is getting better as well, and for me, it just feels wonderful to be back in my hometown because I haven't visited in 6 or 7 years. So it's been great in that sense.
Excellent. That's nice. And you're staying there for a little bit longer, but we still can make some more Svetlana's smart moves. But of course, this is a little bit of a special episode because you have not only played a super strong tournament in Serbia for where Nihal Sarin, for example, has won the tournament. You were, of course, also participating in Sochi and the World Cup, and you have been doing a very, very good job. Unfortunately, it was over after the first round already, but you've been fighting like a beast. I mean, I didn't expect anything else from you, but
Thank you.
it
Thank
was
you.
it was 5 games after all, right? Or
Six,
even
six games. Yeah.
6 games. And there was only one loss. Everything else was drawn against a
Yeah.
300 to 400 points stronger opponent. I mean, massive, massive. Anyway, so what I wanted to just make this episode a little bit special is I wanted to talk about your experience. You, as a 17-year-old chess prodigy, who is traveling.
That's a little. That's a strong word.
Chess coach. That was the
Okay.
word I was missing. You're traveling. Yeah, you're traveling from Canada to Europe to Sochi and back again, and you're participating in a lot of tournaments. So I received a lot of pictures which you have taken in the last couple of weeks, and I will just go through the pictures with you, and then we can take a look at. You can talk a little bit about your experiences and how it felt like in all of this. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
let's do this. Hey Svetlana, here we are again.
Hi.
Now it is time for some new smart move. Let me just try to say that again. Now it is time for some new smart moves of yours, and of course, this is a special episode. You had this little interview and the little sightseeing tour, and now we will analyze one of your games, or not. We will analyze. Of course, you will just show us one of your games. You will yeah, just show us how you played, what your thoughts were, all of that.
Nice.
So here we are. Which round was that?
This was. I'm showing the very first game.
Hmm.
Um, the one that. Yeah. Let's put us here. This was the very first game of the first round. And I was playing as black here, so I'll also flip the board.
Perfect.
So yeah, this was in the FIDE Women's World Cup, and this is the game I played around a week ago. And my opponent was a Polish WGM and IM, and her name is Karina Sivka. I think people usually recognize her from her previous last name, Szczepkowska,
Mhm.
and she used to be the Polish women's champion and plays for the national Polish team at Olympiads.
Tough
Uh,
opponent. Can I quickly ask you,
yeah.
once you knew you had to play against her, what was your feeling? And, like, can you maybe in a couple of sentences explain how you prepared?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Actually, I found out I was playing her maybe 2 weeks before the tournament started.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe three, and And I was pretty happy with the pairing,
Mhm.
honestly, because it's always the way the pairings work is you always get paired against someone much
Sure.
higher rated. Um, it's like first seed plays the last seed, and then it goes down from there, and then somewhere in the middle they play someone of a similar rating. So I
Mhm.
knew I was going to get a really really strong opponent. And this was a player that I've already played against. I played against her at the online Olympiad the year before that. It was rapid, so it's not the same. But I played against her in the rapid
Mhm.
online Olympiad, and I ended up winning that game. But I was lucky. I was if she hadn't made the mistake in time trouble, I don't think I would have won. So
Mm.
I was lucky, but it was still nice to play against someone who I already knew what she played like, what her strengths and weaknesses were. So yeah, and I did a bit of preparation before, but not exactly preparation, because I didn't really have much time with traveling and
Sure.
going to Serbia before. So I mainly just basically in my head decided what I was going to do, and and then just repeated like a day before the tournament.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so it's she played
The
d4.
first surprise.
Uh,
Did you did
well, I'm not. It wasn't exactly a surprise. Well, my opponent plays both e4 and d4,
Okay.
so I was it was one of the expected things, and it is what she played against me in the online Olympiad um, a year ago.
Mhm.
And actually, in that game, I went for the King's Indian.
Mhm.
So this time I decided to switch it up a little and play something different,
Okay.
not something that I would normally play against her.
Good.
And I played the Bogo Indian.
Okay, very clever. I mean, of course, yeah. If she expects that, if she has played you already, she might very well prepare a lot for G6, which didn't happen.
Right, right. So this I don't really think she was prepared for, and she made a move which is kind of a sideline. Usually, you would go for bishop d2. That is the usual continuation.
Hmm.
And here now, black has a ton of choice. It's basically just a matter of personal preference. You can go, and everything surprisingly gives completely different types of position. You can go for something like queen e7 and develop in this way. This is slightly different. You give up the bishop pair, but you get the e4 square.
Yeah.
So this is one of the possible continuations. If you play with queen e7, if you play the positions with a5, again, that is different because then you do a different sort of pawn structure setup and you go for different plans.
Hmm.
You could also take on d2. That is one of the very common lines as well,
Hmm.
where you then go for a central d5 and you play this type of position. So basically, a
Wow.
lot of things can happen. You can even retreat the bishop. Usually, people do this
Huh.
in the Bogo Indian when you want the bishop to be on d2, so you're provoking the bishop to come to d2 before,
Ah.
and then you retreat. So you could because otherwise you could have just played bishop e7 right away, right?
Sure.
But you're going to b4. You're provoking the bishop coming to d2 and then coming back. And now, basically, this bishop is kind of in the middle, blocking the queen, blocking the knight from going to
Yeah.
d2, and the bishop is just doing nothing there, and it will just have to move somewhere
So
else.
so if it ever happens that the bishop is moving back to c1, does is this like a thing where you go like, okay, that's a draw, or I mean,
Not really, because if you move to c1, then you basically lost a move
makes sense.
because
I get
the
you.
bishop came
Okay,
in. But so
thank
the
you.
bishop is
Yeah,
going somewhere here,
yeah, yeah.
g5 probably.
Good you mentioned this because yeah, that was a stupid idea I just had, and it's not working. You're right.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it works in some openings, so that is true. So this is what I was more or less expecting because it's what it usually does.
Hmm.
But instead, she played knight to d2. It's not the most common line, but I think she I think she knew a bit of this setup, and she wanted to surprise me back a little and not go for the main lines. And so basically, yeah, from here on, I just knew the setup I was going to go for.
Mhm.
Didn't really know much theory, to be honest, but I somehow actually played theory for a very long time, and that happens to me a lot. When I don't actually know the theory, but I somehow end up just playing it because usually just the most logical moves. But the problem with
I
that
think
is
that's a
that
good sign.
but the problem is that instead of actually knowing the theory, I spend my time and I think about it and then I come up with it. So this is why knowing theory is actually
I
would be super helpful.
understand. Yeah. Ah, damn. Yeah, I didn't even think of this. Yeah, yeah. Good point.
But still, it's a good it's a good sign that I still went for went for something that people play and not just something completely random.
Mhm.
But it's yeah, all the moves are fairly obvious. It's a setup that you go for a lot in the Bogo Indian. Bogo Indian is actually it's a version, I guess, of the Nimzo Indian, Queen's Indian. And the reason why it's called that it's because it was played by a lot by Efim Bogolyubov,
Mhm.
and since then it's been called the Bogo Indian. But yeah, the Nimzo would be if the knight had been on c3, and so the names are a little different, but the idea is still the same. You have the setup with e6, b6, and the bishop on b7, and these are the positions that
Okay.
arise a lot. So these are all pretty much theoretical moves. They're regular setups for both white and black.
Mhm.
Um, Now, my opponent took on d5. Again, this is a very common move. And I took back with the pawn. And just to clarify, in case I take back with the piece, for example, with the knight, I did not really want to go for something like that because now white has the option to play e4 either right away
Mm.
or just at some point, and that just gives white some space. And I preferred to take back with the pawn and have this pawn structure. It changes a lot actually. This deciding to go for this pawn structure
Mhm.
instead of taking back with the piece, because now, well, the plans are going to change. Now I'm going to have to go for c5, and now white doesn't go for e4 anymore. So
Oh, okay.
so yeah, all of these little things can change a bit the character of the game. Then the game continued again with some developing moves from both me and my opponent. Somehow, again, this is still theory.
Ye-
I was not aware of it.
Not bad. Yeah, I'm thought like this bishop now is pretty lost on b4, so he has to move. So yeah.
Right, right. Also, in this opening, it's very often that you give up this bishop for the knight, usually on
Uh-huh.
c3, maybe on d2, but usually on c3, or you exchange it for something. But you would do this after white plays
Okay.
a3, of course, because you would rather have them lose this move on a3, and then you exchange it. So exchanging it is actually a fairly common technique, but here there was really nothing to exchange it for and no reason for the bishop to stay on b4, so it's retreated and now it's attacking the knight on e5. So now after bishop to g5, this was an interesting point. I played queen to e8, which I wasn't. Well, of course, I didn't really know that this was theory. Apparently, I did find some games in this after. So apparently, this is a move. People have played this before. There's
Crazy.
actually this game right here that went similarly to what I did. And yeah, so this looks very similar to what happened in my game. So apparently there have been games here before. So queen e8 is a move.
Mhm.
And just to explain why I went queen to e8, so now actually white did make a threat with this bishop g5 move. If I play, let's say, for example, h6, looks like a normal move attacking the bishop. This would unfortunately not work right now because white can capture on d7. And the tricky part is that I cannot ever capture with a knight because of the pin.
Sure.
So I will have to capture back with the queen. And now I will have a ruined pawn
Bit
structure,
ugly, yeah.
and it is definitely not something I want. And I cannot go capture the bishop either because then the knight will just take my rook on f8. So something like h6 would be a huge mistake here. I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
the position would probably be lost with those really ugly pawns. So that's why queen e8 gets rid of the pin. And now on knight takes on d7, I can take back with the knight. And this is actually the way it happened in the game. Now, basically, we arrive at this position. We're pretty much out of the opening. Are you familiar with these setups, Arnie? Do you play this as either white or black?
That's the very first time I've ever seen this in my whole life.
Really?
Not that terrible, but I've probably never played something like this, no.
Okay, well, it's because you're not a d4 player, and so it's
Yeah.
okay. It makes sense. So some plans usually for black is to go for c5, and white is probably just going to develop pieces for now. Maybe try to just put everything in the center and get ready for the time when I do play c5, and then we're gonna have. Actually, we'll get to it. We're gonna have kind of a hanging pawns situation. You know, when the pawn is on d5 and c5.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting type of position as well. So I play queen e6 just to connect the rooks, prepare c5. It was possible to go for c5 right away, but I was actually a little bit concerned about this b4 move because I will have to take it probably, and then I wasn't sure that I was liking this position. Because d5 is going to fall eventually. This knight is coming to f5 or like b5, something like this. I wasn't really liking this position, so I decided to wait a little bit and not play c5 right away. So we again made some developing moves, and finally c5 happened. I'm going through with my plan, and she's going through with her plan. So this was an interesting point. Actually, maybe I can ask you, what would you play in this position as black?
Okay, so that is an interesting move with bishop to f4. That must have been played for a reason. Okay, so the reason might be to get rid of the bishop on d6, which is also defending c5 at the moment. And by doing this, white is, getting a double pawn if you take it back. So the question is, what would I do? If I push on c4, I would weaken my d5 pawn too much, I guess, to keep it up. The rook from A to C would always be an option, maybe. I'm looking at a sneakier move, like, doesn't help much, but A5 and then the bishop to A6, maybe.
You're actually missing one of white's big threats right now.
Oh.
White made a threat with this bishop f4 move.
Which is probably advancing the knight to e5. Okay, now I get it. It's the... Thank you. Yeah, that I missed. How long would have this been taking me if you wouldn't have said there's a big threat? Yes, of course, there is a huge threat, actually. And it doesn't even matter if I would take the bishop, because the bishop doesn't even have to be taken back, because the knight will go to g5.
No, the bishop would have to be taken back, but yes, knight g5 is the big threat in this position.
Yeah, you're right. Oh God.
Yeah, but what would you play?
So, yeah, that is. So h6 is maybe an option, or queen to g6, I guess.
Well, queen to g6 is not working because.
I'm losing a piece.
Yeah, you're losing a piece.
Not good.
But basically, all of the moves that you have mentioned, I have looked at and I did consider. I ended up playing h6, which I don't think was best. I think the two better options were also the things that you have mentioned, were taking the bishop. So, for example, playing this and then c4, or just playing c4 right away. And this position. So basically, I wasn't really familiar with these setups, and I wasn't. I think someone who is a very experienced, Queen's Indian player would probably play this c4 move immediately and know that these type of pawn structures are good for black. But I wasn't really sure. I was considering it, But yeah, I was thinking like you were that maybe d5 is weak, maybe some e4 is coming up
Yeah.
at some point, and maybe it's not the best pawn structure for me. But I actually now having taking a look at it is actually, I think, a pretty good pawn structure for black. Um, it now there's going to be no more hanging pawns
Yeah.
situation, and it gives me a little more space, and it is something that is quite common, I guess, which I didn't exactly
Yeah.
know.
I
And apparently it's a good pawn structure for black.
I also like just this option. Of course, I'm looking for the mate as always. Immediately, queen to g4, rook to e6. Like very cheap, of course. Yeah,
Right.
but
Right.
still,
But still, it's maybe some rook lifts in the future
yeah.
for sure. So I played h6 though
Hmm.
to prevent knight to g5. It was because I wasn't exactly sure that this c4 would be an
Yeah.
improvement for my pawn structure. So I just played it slow and played h6. I don't think it was the best move, but it doesn't really ruin my position much. It just changes it a lot because now we have arrived at this point where we have a like
Hmm.
hanging pawns
Hmm.
situation
Hmm.
with the pawn on d5 and then c5, and it's a very specific type of position actually, because it's like the positions with an isolated queen pawn,
Yes.
right? They arise a lot in different sorts of openings, and there are some strategies to play against it, there are some strategies to play with it.
Hmm.
And there's the same thing with hanging pawns, where they could be considered a weakness because they can both be attacked, right? And once you push one of them, then the other becomes a backward pawn.
Yeah.
So it's fairly tricky to play with them. But at the same time, if let's say an endgame comes along, then they could be farther advanced, and maybe one of them could become a pass pawn. So it's and they're also protecting a lot of squares here in the middle. So they could be a bad thing, they could be a good thing, and it's just a very specific type of position that you need to learn how to play if you play openings in which they arise a lot.
Okay.
So now white played knight to d2.
Hmm.
And as you can see, the ideas are to play knight c4, knight e4, maybe to play e4 as well,
Yeah.
because my queen on d6 is not protected. So this pawn is kind of losing its control over the two squares, and white was trying to make use of it by playing this knight d2 move, and also opens up the bishop to attack my d5 pawn. I played rook to b8, and the idea is to just keep an eye out on the b2 pawn in the future. So now, in case white did go through with the plan of playing knight c4, I can just simply play something like this and retreat my bishop to a8, and it opens up a nice file for the
Hmm.
rook, and it would make a nice attack. And in case of e5, I have enough time to play knight e5, and yeah, just something along those lines. And again, my queen on d6 is not in danger anymore.
Okay. Okay.
So white played b3.
Hmm.
It's quite a slow move, but it doesn't do anything bad. It blocks my rook from attacking on b2. It keeps all of the e4 ideas for later use, and yeah. So now I have to basically figure out what I'm going to do. And this is move 20, if you can notice. And move 20 is the halfway point between the beginning and move 40. And move 40 is when you get the additional 30 minutes added.
So how was the time situation for both of you?
The time situation here, I write down the time during the
You
games.
do? That is
I do.
interesting.
Yeah,
I've never done.
it's a pretty common
Wait a
it's a
second.
pretty common thing that people do. I think it's really useful.
Okay.
I think it's really useful to not just after the game, after you're looking at it, but also during the game, because you can see kind of, if you write it down on every single move, you can kind of see how long you spent thinking on this move, or how long your opponent spent thinking on this move. Because sometimes you don't realize that it's like you get to notice things like, oh, my opponent spent 25 minutes on this last move that they made. And it's just for you to know, and also, of course, useful later when you're analyzing the games. You get to see maybe how long you spent on your mistakes.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so I
understand.
would
Yeah.
I would recommend writing down the time. You don't have to do it on every move. Some people do it every 5 moves,
Hmm.
every 10 moves.
Yeah, I've seen it all. Yeah, probably you as well.
Yeah, so the time situation here was that she had 19 minutes and I had 16 minutes,
Hmm.
which is not great time
It's
management
a
because
rapid game.
we are only halfway through the temp control, so we would need to make 20 more moves to get to 40 minutes, and
That's tough. Yeah, that's less
that's
than.
tough. So now we're basically playing a rapid game from here
Yeah,
on, and that's where everything gets decided. Usually, games get decided in time trouble, right? It's just inevitable for people to make mistakes in time trouble. My my coach used to always say that no one is a hero with 30 seconds. So even even the best players make mistakes, when they have 30 seconds.
that's
So
funny.
anything can happen.
So was this already a mistake? But I mean, can you not just take the pawn on? Can White not take the pawn on
Try to
c5?
calculate what's gonna happen if you take the pawn on c5.
Okay, so because oh yes, that
Do you see it?
I even saw that when I was watching your game on ChessBase Live. Yes, the knight goes to d3, which is beautiful after taking the queen.
Right.
Yeah, that's a nice little sneaky trick. Well done, Svitlana.
And White is not able to take it because of
Yeah,
this. Well, it's probably the only move that they can make, but they're losing material after rook to e1. So the pawn was a poison pawn and could not be taken by White. So it was a little trick. I knew she wasn't going to
sure.
fall for it, but yeah, so the pawn cannot be taken right now. What White can do, though, is play f4 and maybe try to move my knight somewhere. My opponent did not play this, but this is what I was expecting.
Hmm.
And at this point, I was going to play something, just knight back to d7, and maybe something like queen b6. And now there's some c4 threats with
Sure.
discovery attacks. Yeah, this is what I was aiming to do, and it gets pretty tactical here, which was good and bad at the same time because we were
Hmm.
both in time trouble. But this also meant that there are opportunities for me to make mistakes, for her to make mistakes. So it would just get like to a really interesting point. So she played h3 though, because I assume she wanted to play f4, but she was probably scared of my knight coming to
Yeah,
g4.
I saw
Um,
that too earlier, but then I thought like it's actually not that scary if she would play e4 after that anyway, right?
yeah, I don't think knight g4 is that scary,
Yeah.
because I think white can take my pawn and maybe go for this e4. I do understand that from her perspective, it's not that clear
Hmm.
because she has to calculate a lot of things.
Hmm.
She doesn't know what if I have some like rook c8 and queen b6 and then something is happening on that diagonal. So I think she just wanted to play it safe and not make a mistake in time trouble and just play h3, useful move anyway,
Hmm.
and yeah, just play it safe. So now I played rook to c8 so that my pawn on c5 isn't hanging anymore. And now finally f4 did happen.
Yeah, a nice move. Yeah, of course.
And my knight retreated. Probably the only way that I could have gone
Yeah,
with the knight. And now after e4, again, remember
yeah.
here's us. We're probably at 10 minutes each, so it's getting to the interesting part, to the part where we were both making a few mistakes, and it's starting to get more and more tactical with every move. So I will try to explain most of the tactics. So now this pawn structure that we're talking about, I could have captured. I think it's probably the next best option, if not the best. and play this type of pawn structure. I wasn't exactly enjoying it because c5 is weak. Oh, sorry. Someone's kept calling me.
You weren't exactly enjoying this?
I did not play this in the game, but I don't think I really like this position because knight some point coming to d6. The pawn is weak, but I do have my own counterplay. I do have my own chances. But this is why I didn't really want to take on e4, so I decided to keep it close for now and just keep my options open and play queen to g6. And the other thing is, if I push for d4, which is also usually not a bad idea, but it leaves control of the c4 square to white and leaves e5 option to white. And now my hanging pawns are kind of blocked. And although this is a passed pawn, white can blockade it for now, and it just leaves them more options of what to do.
That is
so like queen to g6, really attacking.
Yeah, exactly. This is also what I saw. It's a complicated position, definitely.
Yeah, it got very, very complicated super quickly, and it got complicated right at that time when we were both in time trouble. Yeah. So, yeah, and just to clarify, white will not be able to take my pawn, so this is not really a free pawn because of the rook e1.
Win a queen, yeah.
Yeah. So that is why white played king h2. I played d4, e5, and at this point I took a while to think. I used almost all of my time, probably left myself like 2 or 3 minutes. What do you think about this position? How would you evaluate it, and what do you think you would play here as black?
Yeah, so there are many options, of course, and it's
the question is to make the queen trade, to not make the queen trade,
and
what to do after.
I'm looking at, I don't know, pushing forward the d3. And all of this with time trouble, it's really... Respect, Svitlana, I have to tell you, because I would have to think about this also for a long time, probably more than 10 minutes. Yeah, it's the... First of all, I don't have a plan. That's a bit of a pity. I also do not like that this pawn is so far in front, because at one point there can be g4, f5, e6. My queen is in the worst position. The pawn on c5 gets weaker.
So what you're trying to say is you just don't like my position.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Svitlana. No, at the moment I'm not so keen with it, and so no, you have to help me here. How did you get out of this?
Well,
maybe black is better. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, black is not better, I don't think.
Okay.
But the two options that I would seriously consider is to trade queens or to play bishop d3 and avoid the queen trade.
That was another thought I had, but yeah, I wouldn't know after
d3
that.
I'm not sure I like, because the queen is gonna go somewhere else, and then bishop e4, and somehow I have a feeling white will pick up that pawn eventually.
Sure.
So queen c2 was I was feeling that queen c2 was probably the better move objectively, and then going for this endgame and being probably slightly worse because basically white has ideas like knight e4 and knight d6, it's not that bad, like probably just slightly worse for black, but just more unpleasant to play, and I didn't exactly like this endgame. So even though I thought it was objectively better than bishop to d3, but since we were both in time trouble, and I just thought that keeping the position more complicated was the more practical decision, even if I am slightly more worse in this line, at least it keeps the queen on, it leaves me some more attacking chances, and anything can happen when we're both in time trouble. But the point here was that, like you said, it's a little difficult to come up with a plan for black, because you don't really have time to reposition your knight somewhere, and I'm not even sure where the knight can go. you cannot really push the pawns anywhere. So basically, I decided to go for. The best thing is probably to just play queen e6 and exchange the bishops and just play this position. Again, probably worse, but you're not down material. You have your pawns.
Still a good fight.
It could still be a fight. I played f6, so I do admit that it was a bad move. But like I said, I could not exactly see much of another plan.
Completely understand. I would have probably made something very similar. Yeah, it even looks a bit logical because you just want to try to destroy this pawn structure, which might get stronger. So this is
exactly. So if white ever takes, that is amazing news for me because I can now take, and now I even think that black would be better in a situation like this.
So white didn't take, of course.
White doesn't have to take and doesn't have to leave the pawn there and move forward to e6, which I, of course, knew that this was going to happen and that this was going to be unpleasant. And, the pawn here is, of course, a really strong pawn, but at the same time, maybe that gives me chances to attack it because it's not protected.
Yes.
By f4 anymore.
Yeah, f5 is a good thing to think of at one point, maybe, and
Yeah, that's true. f5 is always an option. Now, my opponent plays this queen to a3 move, which is a very annoying double attack onto both c5 and a7. So one of the pawns will have to go at some point, and that was a very unpleasant move to deal with. But still, I have a lot of tactics left in the position. So now, if I go for this f5 move, like you mentioned, now white can take this pawn, and then eventually take on d4 or even bishop d.
Yeah,
bishop
but
d5.
Your knight is still there, so
yeah, but still not very pleasant.
No, not at all. Not at all.
d4 falls. So although I would probably end up being down a pawn there, not the end of the world, but I think probably objectively lost. So now I was playing f5. This is, again, it has two purposes. One of them is to defend c5, and the other purpose is to take on e6. And
it looks so crowded. Yeah, but it isn't actually, right?
Right. It looks very crowded and very scary to put the queen here. But g4 is not working just yet because f5 is. So it's all hanging on by a very, very little thread, and it was quite scary.
Wow.
But yeah, bishop e4, I would probably just trade and be okay. So basically now, in case white ever takes on a7, I would take on e6. And I think this is more or less okay now because this rook is magically defending everything. And somehow I'm not really losing anything. So it just became a pawn trade of a pawn for an e pawn, which is a good thing for black. So yeah, now she plays knight to f3 with the idea of kicking away my queen here, actually trapping it. Almost trapping it, I think. If not all, no, it actually is trapping it. Knight h4, queen h5, and bishop f3 traps the queen. Oof. So my queen could have been in trouble here, which is why I think I've been playing only defensive moves like g5. So knight cannot go onto h4 anymore. And now after takes, this is also the other critical moment in the game. I think actually one of the most important ones. What would you play here as white? What would your ideas be, and do any of the tactics work out, do you think?
So... Okay, oh no, this is not working for white, sorry. I thought about b4, but that's stupid. Then there's c4, of course.
Why? No, you actually were on the right track.
Oh, no.
It was the right move. I don't think it's not something that difficult to see because it's right. You want to attack this pawn, you want to attack this pawn.
And yeah.
It is actually the best move in the position.
Oh,
Now, c4 is not working, right? Because wait, knight d5 is knight d5 working? Is knight d4? Well, at the very least, something like queen a7 is always here, and now rook e6 probably bad because d4 hangs in the end. So c4 is not the move that to be
Okay.
scared of, but knight c4 maybe, and this is what I was thinking to play against this b4 move. I thought it was super unpleasant. I couldn't find anything better than just basically playing this down a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, does not look very pleasant. So I think c4, b4 was the move that would give super good chances to play for a win. Yeah, but she made a mistake here. Actually, again, she was in time trouble, so it's completely understandable, and played e7.
Mm-hmm.
So this I think actually helps me a lot because it gives me more space. It doesn't threaten anything at the moment, and I was happy with this e7 move. I was surprised about not seeing b4 happen, but I was happy with this e7 move.
Mm-hmm.
b4 again, it's the typical plan to undermine c5 and then later win the d4 pawn, which I think would have been perfect in this.
Quick question: when you're in this position here right now, like one step back only, and you think of like, okay, in this little amount of time, what will white play? Did you think of b4? Was this in your head?
Yeah, I did think of b4, but right, it's one of those things that I could not have seen, like 4 moves ago, because it's simply when you don't have enough time to calculate everything, and I was basically making only moves. Queen f5, almost only like fighting move. G5 only move, right? I have to take back, and here while she's still thinking, I see that she can play b4, and the only thing I see is that it's a mess after something like knight c4, queen takes, like I'm down a pawn, but it's some sort of mess. Maybe I have some knight e3s, like I just I basically was just seeing whatever ideas I could have, and I suspected that after b4 I would probably be much worse, if not completely lost. But at that point it doesn't matter. You don't think if you're lost or if you're winning. You just think about how do I survive? How do I create problems? So yeah, I was seeing this, and it's not a good feeling seeing a move that you think is winning for your opponent, but you just have to pretend. You just have to pretend it's fine and hope that they don't go for it.
Yeah, this is what I sometimes think. Like, I often have it that I'm playing a move and then I'm seeing a really good move from my opponent. I'm like, oh no, please don't play this. Please do not play this. Please. Okay, it has been played. Well, great, fantastic, and it affects you. You don't think of anything else in that moment, which you probably, well, I don't know.
Yeah. The goal is to never have positions where one of the opponent's moves is unpleasant for you. Like you always, for whatever they play, like you have a plan for it.
Yeah. And
in that case, you'll never be in those situations where, but sometimes there are some things that you can't predict. Not everything you can calculate. So yeah, she played e7, which I think makes my job a little bit easier, and I didn't use the chance to play rook c7. And as you can see, rook c7 attacks both here and defends here, so it would have been a very, very nice move. But I actually did not even consider it, probably because I just saw, knight d4. No, I'm not playing this. Knight d4, and then like this, and I just didn't even look at it. So rook c7 was actually the equalizing move, and it's not something I even considered, and I was really low on time, so just played whatever was the first thing that came to mind, which was also a mistake. It was bishop to e4. because I don't know, I just wanted to take on f3, wanted to get rid of all of these threats, block the rook's file. But there were actually a tactic here, which I did see when I was playing bishop e4, but I just simply, like, when I have 30 seconds, it's like you either play this or you lose on time. So
Yeah.
I didn't see anything better. I guess, yeah, I had to just find rook c7. But I didn't see anything better. I knew there's some crazy tactics after knight d4, which was the correct move, which she did not play, actually. And I think I understand a little bit why. So knight d4, it's fairly obvious. I'm sure she saw it. It's not a very complicated tactic. But the thing is that she had to evaluate what to take with after. So if she takes back with the bishop, I don't think she's actually that much... Well, she probably is better, but this d3 pawn is going somewhere.
Out of a sudden,
The queen is on f2, harassing the king. So you probably don't want to go for this when you were just positionally better, because she was positionally better at a few moves ago. So the correct thing was to take back with the rook, and then I would have to, I guess, go for a position like this, where I'm currently down a pawn. I'm probably getting this one back, maybe in exchange for this one. And then I guess I'm defending an endgame, but it's unpleasant because I'm just down a pawn. Yeah, probably I don't even have to, maybe I just never have to take this pawn and just hope for the best with this one. But I think this would be quite unpleasant and probably just lost to play without. And I guess she was also not really calculating everything in the best way, because she was also nervous and in time trouble. So she took the other pawn that she saw, and it was queen on a7, which was quite a relief for me, because now there's I'm not really down a pawn anymore. So here, to get rid of this knight d4 threat, of course my knight is hanging on b6, so just like this queen e7 move is actually fairly logical too, right? You defend the pawn, you attack this knight, and it looks good, except I ended up having some of my own resources because of white's king being starting to become a little weak. So now if white takes back, right, I'm just going to take, and this is actually transposing to the game continuation almost, where I would have a perpetual check.
Yes.
Here, and I would make the draw. So instead she took this knight, and I took on g2, gave one check.
Yes.
My rook up. I could have... It did not have to. I think queen f3 was a move.
Queen f3 immediately, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. So.
Even king f7, I think, is a move, and try to win this one. Right? The kings are not really in that much danger anymore because minor pieces are gone. So the only thing they have to watch out for is checks from the queen. So the game continued like this, and now that she let my queen get in, I'm pretty sure that there are no more winning chances left for white. Even though white is currently up a pawn from that pawn that they took on a7, but by doing that, but by doing that, they lost a bit of time with the queen, and the pawns are... I can win this pawn in the future. I can attack this pawn. So the extra pawn doesn't really make itself super useful here. She played king h2, which goes for an immediate draw. I'm not sure what else she could do to not go for that draw.
I wouldn't know either.
Queen e2 and then queen g2. I mean, that's... you can even lose, because you can lose the pawn on g3. You lose the pawn on e7 after. So I'm actually really not sure what else there could be done about this. And and now there is a perpetual check that white cannot avoid. If they go to g1, then I take on g3 with a check. And actually here I was even considering, what if I have like some winning chances with d3?
I saw that too, and I thought, so, oh wow,
but at the end I decided that this isn't really a huge a huge winning chance, I would probably have to go for the perpetual eventually. I could try for something like c4 and then like just put everything on my d3 pawn and win this one, maybe win this one, and then try to win. But I really don't think this is winning. I think something like this should be a draw eventually, because one of us is going to have a perpetual check. So the way it ended was just with the perpetual check right away with queen f2, and we repeated moves. Actually, just at the time when we arrived at the 40th move and got the extra 30 minutes to think about, there was really nothing more to think about, and it was just a draw.
Fantastic. Very, very good. What a nice, interesting game. Yes, I saw it a couple of times when I was going to the chess base live games. Looked at your game, and then was this crucial situation, and put on the engine, and I see it went like down a bit, and I was like, oh no, you're not gonna make it. But then it went like up a bit, and he's like, yes, go for it. And then I just saw that you managed to get the draw. Sometimes I believe it's hard for me to think of getting a draw, because I always want to win my game, which is like very childish after all. But like
childish, it's just everyone is different.
That's nice how you how you said that. Yeah, so I should really get a bit more into a mindset that, okay, this is going to be a defending game. I have to defend from this point on, not try to win it with a pawn less. I have to defend, and I have to play good moves, because then things can change around. And
that is true. And I think it's especially hard to get out of the attacking mindset if you, let's say you're playing someone lower rated than you and you're obviously trying to win the whole time. And at some point, this is why there are some upsets, is when I feel like it's usually the higher rated player who is trying to push for a win too much, or just and this is why they end up making mistakes. So I mean, from my point of view, I was the lower rated player, so it's not like I didn't try to win. I still tried, and I would have gone for an attack if I had the chance. So it wasn't like that, but at the same time, it was probably a little easier psychologically for me to defend than it would be for her, because it's still there's still a big rating difference, and she probably was the player who was expected to push and to play more for a win. But still, I felt quite comfortable like playing against her. I know she's a very strong player, of course, but just psychologically, I guess it wasn't really an issue. She wasn't playing considerably like faster than me, or I didn't feel like she knew much more theory than me, or it was just sometimes, you have opponents who you're very uncomfortable to play against because somehow you just don't understand their plans. But in this case, I felt like I pretty much understood her plans, what she was doing and why she was doing it. So it wasn't really too much of an issue.
Cool. Did you actually exchange some words with her, or was it like very like good game, well played, or something like this? Because at one point, I mean, you played a couple of games, so at one point you leave together maybe, and then you maybe go look at each other and go like, oh, played very, very good. Oh, thank you. You too. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but after the game, we like took the COVID test after the game, and just good game, good luck tomorrow, things like that.
That's nice. Okay, cool. So now, since this is even the super special episode, and we were all hungry for the newest episode of Svitlana's Smart Moves, we are also going to play 2 blitz games. This is the third video of this article today. So if you still don't have enough of Svitlana Demchenko, then I would be happy to see you look at our blitz games. I want to see what Svitlana has learned in this European journey that she's been on. Okay, so thanks for watching, everybody, and see you soon.